Hey, how's it going, fellow Trojans and loyal vassals? So I'd like to apologize for not really establishing an exact kind of date at when I upload videos because, again, I have no form of social media, technically. Originally, I wanted to make it every Wednesday, that kind of thing, but I don't know, I just get too busy with work, and I procrastinate. That's another thing. I try to make it, at this point, I guess I might as well say that, I guess Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. Usually expect at least one kind of video, that kind of deal. If not, then I guess I procrastinate. I'm too lazy and stuff. But anyways, here we have this. I was about to say Figma. Revoltech, specifically under the movie. Let me see. Movie Revo figure complex. Because if you didn't know, Revoltech recently went under a different name branding or something like that, where I guess their official Revoltechs are called Vulcanlog, and they also have another one called Figure Complex or Movie Revo, and they make figures, I guess, based off of movies. And this one in particular is Iron Man's appearance in Civil War, which I haven't seen yet. And I thought there was something off about this figure when I was looking at the back, when I was looking at the online shots for the preview of this figure. I noticed that something about this figure seemed off. And sure enough, when I finally got him and I looked at who the sculptor was, it's by a guy named Otsunobu Chika. And it confused me because normally when it comes to Revoltech, the main sculptor, if you guys didn't know, is Yamaguchi Katsuhisa or Katsuhisa. Oh, did I say that twice? Katsu. No, it's there. I don't think there's an S. Katsuhisa? I don't know, I think it's Katsuhisa Yamaguchi, responsible for the main line of Yamaguchi line, if you didn't know, obviously, because it's his same name. But this guy is sculpted by Otsunobu Chika, because I was looking at the actual body of the figure, and it didn't really look like something Yamaguchi would sculpt, because if you've seen any of his work, you'd notice it's a lot of it is a little bit of the same, more or less. Using the same type of body for the articulation, which I don't mind because I really like Yamaguchi's figures. And this figure in particular is not a Yamaguchi figure. And I didn't really think too much about doing a review, but there are some interesting aspects about this figure, which, by the way, I guess I should mention that I kind of stopped collecting the SH Figuarts IronMan figure. I don't know, it just became too much, the pricing and whatnot. I already have like 6 of them, not in quite 7 if you count the Figma Iron Man, but that's how many Iron Man figures I have. And I will say that obviously that the SH Figuarts Iron Man, at least this version, the Civil War Iron Man, is gonna look better. I don't have it, so I can only assume that it's just aesthetically gonna look way more better than this figure. In terms of articulation, though, I think this one might win it a little bit. I can't say because I don't have the figure, but if the SH Figuarts version is anything like the other SH Figuarts Iron Man figures, then it's going to be pretty good. However, there are some interesting design choices for this Iron Man figure. I will say this: if you missed out on the SH Figuarts Mark 45 Iron Man figure, this is a good substitute. I'm not actually sure where to find this guy. I got mine on Amazon Japan because, again, I got a Tenzo account. I'm just saying, guys, you can get some good deals if you have a Tenzo account. Buy stuff on Amazon Japan. I don't really want to say, I don't like Big Bad Toy Store, mainly because they overprice stuff twice than what it's originally worth, because they have to import the items. That's why I get it. But I think I've only purchased 2 items from Big Bad Toy Store, but that was like way back when I started collecting figures. I think it was like a Figma, 2 Figma, the Michael Jackson Steins Gate figure, but that's besides the point. I'm getting off track there. So yeah, as far as I really like the articulation on this figure. Paint job is pretty good. Aesthetically, he looks alright. He kind of looks glossy to me again, but that's just kind of how Revoltech material looks like. The SH Figuarts one obviously looks better, but it still looks good to me. It's a matter of, I guess it's just a matter of a preference for you, but this one's still pretty good. So on to what I think is probably the most interesting. I'll just point out the stuff that I thought was kind of interesting. This kind of abdomen kind of articulation kind of thing going on. It kind of looks something you would see on a US figure, kind of how like those like the Marvel Legends kind of figures where they have this type of a cut at the waist where it's kind of squared. It's kind of on a hinge and you can give them the ab crunch. It kind of looks like that, and I don't really like it, but then again, I don't collect Marvel Legend figures. So this is kind of weird to me, and his upper body is actually you can actually move his chest piece. It's on a double jointed revoltech. I thought that was probably the most strangest thing. I don't think I've ever seen a figure where his chest can detach from his body like that and just hover across it. I mean, there is a reason behind it because it does come with a little gimmick, but this is just kind of weird. On the bright side, you can kind of see the details going on. Well, not really, just right here in this part of the underneath it. Interesting stuff. Does it have details on the back? No, it doesn't. But I just thought that was interesting. I guess that's to give him more of an ab crunch because his lower part is actually segment. It's a double jointed revoltech joint. So if you notice, I'm just moving the bottom at this point. So that's the bottom articulation. If you combine it with the secondary, you can get even crazier ab crunch. I mean, granted, his chest piece isn't connected to it, so it looks kind of off, but it's still pretty impressive. So I will commend them on that. I think Yamaguchi would have done it better though, but that's just bias towards me, for me. His shoulder pieces are not double jointed because if you don't know, most of the new Revoltech or the Vulcanlog line of figures, they do have a double jointed shoulder, which allows them to get crazy poses and allows them to move their arm across the chest really good. Well, he can still do it, but I mean, if he had a double jointed elbow, he can get it even further across his chest. So there's that. It is at an angle. The Revoltech joint is pointed inwards into the body, so that's why he's able to move it like that. Simple stuff. At the head, he does have a double jointed neck. This piece being the neck piece being just a floating piece, just floating above the two joints. Unfortunately, he can't really get it up. Oh well, no, never mind. He can. Never mind. I take that back. You just gotta play with it a bit. That didn't sound right. That whole sentence. Moving on. Another thing I don't like is actually something I don't really like is the whole wrist. Like it just looks wrong. Specifically on this one, you can kind of see there's just a massive gap between the actual wrist and the hand piece. And my only understanding why that is to give him more, like I'm sure that was done on purpose so they can give the wrist more movement. So it's not limited, because if you know on the SH Figuarts IronMan figures, well, we're not focused. A lot of time the wrist is kind of like a really in, like it's almost as if there's no joint, and it somewhat limits the articulation on the wrist. So they would make they would mold certain hands to be in a certain position, ready for that pose. But with this Revoltech, I guess they wanted to do away with that and just have him be able to do those wrist movements. However, you make it look very aesthetically. You make the risk of making this look creepy and gross. I mean, it's just, look at that gap. I'm running my finger across. That's just, it doesn't look right. I don't know if that's intentional, but I looked on the box and that seems to be the case, that it is intentional. This one being a little bit more gappy. That's not a word, but you can see how this one is more like spread out compared to this one. It's a little bit more condensed, but it's, it's very minor. And it kind of sucks. That's the only thing I don't aesthetically like about this figure. Like, I can get past this, but this I don't really like. That's really gross. So yeah, there's that. At the legs, which this is actually some other interesting aspects about this Revoltech, is that it has these little things. I don't know if there's a name for this, but it's connected at the hip, and it's like I don't know. It's supposed to be one piece, but they made it into two pieces to allow it more movability of the legs, so it doesn't get in the way. So I thought that was pretty cool. I like that. It can be a little bothersome at times, but you can move it around like that freely. That's pretty cool. At the legs, so this is something that I don't think I've mentioned yet. I don't think I've even talked about. Is that Revoltechs don't usually have ball joints at all, but ever since their new rebranding, they've been making use, specifically in the Vulcanlog of Revoltechs, they've been a little bit more lenient in what constitutes as a Revoltech joint, and apparently ball joints do. So this figure does have ball joints, and I'm not sure what kind of material that is, but it's the same on every Vulcanlog or Revoltech of the new branding. If it's like not your typical kind of SH Figuarts type of material or Figma ball joints, I don't know what that kind of material that is, but it works and it doesn't feel loose and it feels right. Moving on, at the thighs, he can move it side to side. It's kind of moving around there, but he can move this side to side. His knee is double jointed, and there's actually an actual piece to cover the actual Revoltech joint. If this was a couple years ago, if this was a Revoltech joint, of a couple of years ago, I guarantee you that that knee piece would not have been there. You could have actually seen the joint and everything, so that's pretty cool. I commend you on that. Good job. I guess one more thing. I know I said the wrists I didn't like, but I guess I also don't like the ankles. Again, they kind of look like they're separated. They're supposed to be more inside his foot, but because of the massive ball joint, I mean the massive revoltech joint, it kind of makes it look like he's wearing sneakers or something like that. I don't know what it's hard to explain. It's a visual thing. You kind of, if you guys understand what I'm saying, then kudos. But if I don't know. It's just a visual thing. You see, I mean, you can see, right? There's like a gap that shouldn't be there. It should be like one piece. Something that the SH figuarts has, where it's connected into one piece. Aside from that, I like this figure. At the bottom, you can see some detail. And oh yeah, that's right. There's a toe hinge. Overall, I think this is a nice substitute for if you missed out on the SH figuarts. For hands, he comes with these pointing hands, which I can only assume these are pointing hands. What else could they be? Or I guess if you wanted, you can have him holding guns. That's what it kind of looks like. You can actually hold a gun with this. See, that's like a trigger holding finger. That's kind of interesting. He came with these open palm hands, which do have peg holes, so you can equip his blast effects over here, which I'll show you in a bit. These are cool. And his karate chopping hands, no, they're not. They're his propulsion shooting hands, his iconic flying pose kind of thing. But you can make it look like a karate chop. Good stuff. On to the blast effects. Nothing too fancy in terms of detail on these guys, but they kind of look like fire candles, like if the top of the fire kind of thing. And they can be easily pegged onto these as such and whatnot. See. Although it does help that if you have, or if you make use of these more, actually no, these are the ones for his blast effect for his hands, which I really like this material. It kind of looks like smoke effect coming out of his wrist. So these are the actual ones that are supposed to be on his wrist, and those are ones that are supposed to be on his feet. So there's that, and the one nice. I think this is the first for a revoltech, or I mean an Iron Man figure. Like, I'm not sure if the US Iron Man figures do this, but this thing has a gimmick where you can actually take his chest piece, this particularly his I forgot the name of this thing, where you can take this thing off. Let's see if I can kind of show you. I don't want to do this on camera, but hold on. I had to do that off camera because this thing was pretty tight in there. This is his little arc reactor was actually on his chest. It's kind of like that, pegged inwards. You have to open it up and then press it outwards, and that's what I did. And then he has a little gap there, and you use this piece right here, so you can put it on his chest. Let's see if I can. Don't do this to me now. Not on camera. And there you go. It kind of sounds like I was breaking it, but then it looks like he is it looks like he's shooting out a beam from his chest. And I didn't know he could do that. I guess this is a Civil War kind of thing, or maybe he could always do that, but that's pretty cool. That's probably the one feature about this box. I mean, about this figure that was shown off prominently. Brah! That also kind of looks like he's being shot in the chest. Either way, it works. Looks nice and clean. So yeah, all in all, I think this is a pretty nice revoltech Iron Man figure. If you missed out on the SH figuarts, this is a good replacement or substitute. Not sure exactly on the pricing right now or anywhere else. I got mine on Amazon Japan, and even then, I don't know why I never remember the price for these figures. It's kind of like I pre-order something without thinking, and then it comes in stock. I get charged, and then I forget. I even forget about this figure until it arrives. That kind of thing. But I think this is pretty cool. All right, Mr. Tony Stark, let's end this on some pretty cool looking poses, but because he can get into some pretty cool poses. Something that I don't think the SH figuarts can do. Let's get into it.